There is a quiet gap in the design field that is still being overlooked, one that could radically shift how we shape spaces and support well being. Welcome to the HAUS podcast, your go to space where design, cognitive sciences, well being, and business come together. I'm your host, Monica Costa, and today you're tuning into a design business capsule, an exploration into strategies and insights that support the business behind your design practice. This podcast is powered by HAUS, born from its mission to guide designers in creating spaces for well-being grounded in cognitive sciences principles, and brought to you in collaboration with Jordi and Duhar, the strategic mind behind it. Let's dive in. We have noticed something that all our mentees at HAUS seem to carry. Like most designers, they're deeply fascinated by the spaces around us, how they look, how they flow, how they hold us, but at the same time, they're driven by something quieter and I think just as strong, which is the deep desire to support people, to understand them, to guide them, and care for how they feel. I recognize that so clearly because I felt that same way. I always knew I wanted to become an architect, but for a while, I wasn't sure that would be enough. There was this part of me that kept wondering if I was meant to support people in a more direct way, maybe even through psychology. I thought about it. And just like my mentees before they discovered this new path, back then I didn't know those two worlds could come together. For me, they had little to do with each other. And this brings me to today's episode. It's a little different because we wanted to show you the enormous opportunity in this emerging area of design. And Jordi has gracefully shared some eye-opening insights into where the industry is heading and why, as a designer, you are perfectly positioned to lead this shift. And I want you to listen closely because this discovery could be the spark that sets you on the path in the bigger shift happening in the design world. Let's talk about it. By now, you may know that design paradigms are shifting, that we're standing at a unique inflection point in the design world, one that's quietly reshaping what it means to be a designer today. A moment when everything we know about design is being expanded by disciplines like neuroscience, psychology, even philosophy and technology. And what that means is that for the first time, we have the tools and the data to intentionally design spaces that impact the brain, body, and behavior. Visually, yes, but also physiologically and psychologically. That alone is revolutionary. But here's what's even more exciting. This shift is opening entirely new markets, from wellness, real estate, and mental health environments to neuroadaptive homes and highly personalized living spaces. Design is no longer just about what looks good, it's about what feels right. So I invite you to start widening your perspective and ask yourself, what happens when beauty becomes a side effect of something deeper, a result of designing for well-being first? What could the design practice look like if it was rooted not just in aesthetics, but in personal transformation? And what becomes possible when you are seen not just as a designer, but as someone who helps people live and feel better? Over the last 20 years, research promoted by organizations like the Academy of Neuroscience for Architecture, ANFA, has helped us understand how space affects the mind, from focus and attention to stress and emotional regulation. And paired with the rise of technologies and biosensor tools, designers can now begin to create responsive environments, spaces that adjust lighting, air quality, and even acoustics in real time based on the user's real needs. That is design moving from static to dynamic, from decorative to functional, from trend-based to evidence-based. And that means that the way we define good design is changing, and that the services clients are looking for are changing too. Instead of using simple questionnaires and offering mood boards, you can now define layouts and finishes that support neurodivergent users, for example, or create circadian-based lighting schemes for burnout support, or support early childhood spaces by boosting developmental growth. or even in home analysis that evaluate VOG levels, acoustic stress, or melatonin suppression risks. And all this because aside from designing, you're intentionally creating spaces that shape cognition and behavior. And that kind of impact creates the kind of value that people are willing to invest in. Now, let's take a closer look at what's really driving the demand for well being centered design. Because if you ever thought that this is just a passing trend, or you wondered if there's truly a market for this, the answer is becoming clearer than ever. What many once dismissed as a nice to have is now backed by data, science, and real behavioral change. We're living through a cultural shift in how we define quality of life and how we expect the spaces around us to support us. And this shift is a growing demand, one that calls for designers that understands well-being at its core and who are ready to integrate insights from cognitive sciences and the user lived experience. So let's now explore what we call the 5 key forces that are shaping this new era of design. The first one is that there are now new benchmark for buildings. Let me explain. For years, the conversation around design centered on protecting the planet, reducing energy use, lowering emissions, doing less harm. But somewhere along the way, we forgot to ask how are these spaces actually supporting the people inside them? That's why the focus is shifting. And don't get me wrong, it continues to care for the planet, but it is now also caring for the human experience. There's a growing shift towards designing buildings that support human health, physically, mentally, and emotionally. In architecture, this conversation has been underway for a while now, thanks to the influence of neuroscience and psychology. But in residential interior design, it's only just starting to catch on. And since we all dwell in interiors, that's where we have a real opportunity to bring these new standards into the everyday spaces where people actually live their lives and enhance their well being. And this brings me to force number 2, which is that well being is steadily taking center stage. According to the Global Wellness Institute and McKinsey, interest in wellness is expanding fast, especially in services that offer sensory experiences across real estate, workplaces, and homes. People are actively seeking environments that help them feel better. Commercial and public architecture are already starting to reflect that. But again, residential design is still in the dark, despite being the most needed one. Now, the third force is more personal because it's the fact that we're starting to design with the mind and body in mind. We're only just beginning to understand how much our surroundings are affecting us, how they shape our mood, our focus, and even how our body feels. Fields like environmental psychology and neuroscience are making this clearer every day. And the Academy of Neuroscience for Architecture has been promoting cross disciplinary research since 2003. And much of that research applies more into interior spaces than the structure of the buildings themselves. Architects have led the way in developing and managing this knowledge, as it often emerges from architectural practice, but interior designers still lack access to it and are not equipped to apply it in their work. While architects do shape the overall design and spatial concepts, interior designers also have the power to bring the science into the spaces that people actually inhabit. So, from our perspective, to truly support well being through design, we need both fields aligned. And that starts by making this knowledge accessible to those working in a smaller scale. Now, this leads me to something we cannot ignore: the mental health wake up call, our fourth force. It's no secret that mental health challenges are at an all time high. According to the World Health Organization, in 2019, approximately 1 in 8 people globally, or 970 million individuals, were living some form of mental illness, with anxiety and depression being the most common. The pandemic only amplified this, with 25% global increase in anxiety and depression during the first year, marking just the tip of the iceberg. Moreover, a report from the Lancet Psychiatry indicates that 1 in 2 people will experience a mental health disorder at some point in their lives, meaning half of the global population may be affected by a mental illness before the age of 75. In Europe, 62% of people report that global events, from war to climate anxiety, have impacted their mental health. In the US, diagnoses have surged since 2019, with 37% of American adults having a diagnosed mental condition in 2023. In the UK, stress related sick leaves continue to rise, particularly among young adults. On the other hand, the latest Sapien Labs report shows that mental well being has not recovered, and it's actually at its lowest in high income countries, with a steep decline among younger generations, especially those exposed to early digital devices and weakened family support. This psychological landscape shapes the environments that we're designing today. Clients are not just aware of these challenges, they are living in them. As a result, they're increasingly cherishing spaces that help them make everyday life more manageable, more grounded, and more supportive of their mental well being. And building on the shift to better support mental health, we now turn to the equally crucial need for inclusive design, where special needs are better understood. And by this I mean there's also increasing awareness and funding around inclusive design. From neurodiversity to mobility challenges or sensory sensitivities, more and more institutions are realizing that generic doesn't work. The one size fits all approach is not enough anymore. In fact, there are 1.3 billion people living with significant disabilities around the globe. Designers who understand these needs and how the nervous system interacts with the space have the tools to create spaces that actually respond to those needs and meet people where they are. They can offer more thoughtful, personalized solutions backed by science, not just style. It's a highly specialized path, and for many, a deeply meaningful one too. This becomes especially powerful when it comes to defining your niche. And if you're curious about how to do that, we break it all down in step by step in Business Capsule episode 003. You'll find the link in the show notes. Now, as the demand for well-being centered design grows, so do the challenges of meeting that demand with integrity, respect, precision, and long term sustainability. And from my position, I can certainly tell you there are some pitfalls designers face when entering this new terrain. I will mention them here so you do not fall into them. The first one is what I call shallow expert syndrome. This is when you claim expertise in your design or well being based interiors without a rigorous foundation. This can lead to superficial results and, even worse, erode client trust. Without a credible methodology or validated knowledge, word can spread fast and not in your favor. The second one is trying to serve everyone, from pediatric to elderly, residential to corporate. This often dilutes your message, spreads your energy thin, and weakens your positioning in a space that calls for clarity and specialization. Another common pitfall is having an opaque value communication. I know designing with science and technology is powerful, but if you cannot clearly explain why it matters, clients will not see the value. Some somewhat complex concepts, like circadian lighting or sensory zoning, need to be translated into real life benefits that your clients feel and understand. And this leads me to pitfall number 4, which is misusing scientific or psychological principles. If you're working in this field, it's vital to approach scientific and psychological principles with respect and care, because misusing these concepts can be more harmful than helpful. And this is because without thoughtful applications, these interventions might miss the mark or, even worse, cause unintended effects that could damage your reputation and credibility. And last but equally important for the integrity of your work is not having a plan for sustainable growth and avoiding burnout. And what I mean is, many designers are drawn to the purpose behind this work, but purpose alone cannot sustain a business. Without systems, support, and a clear framework, it's easy to overextend, lose creative energy, and struggle to grow sustainably, which at the end of the day will only cause your business to decline, and you will fail to benefit the people out there who rely on you for a better life. This is why having a solid foundation is essential. a clear methodology that blends design with proven principles, supported by practical frameworks, a defined niche, a communication with value, and offers that stand out. And because growth without support leads to burnout, it's important to build a sustainable business with systems that allow you to thrive, not just survive. And we know all this works because it's how we guide our mentees to do it. That's the fastest, most effective approach you can take. And I suggest you embrace it now because we are at a turning point. We're no longer waiting for the industry to change. Actually, today I have shared with you 5 main forces causing this shift to occur, meaning change is already here. So it's time to step into your place within it. The future of design will belong to those who blend empathy, science, and creativity to create spaces that support human potential. Things that only a human can do, not AI. This means that grounding your work in evidence and the real subjective well being that every one of us has truly makes a difference and contributes to this shift. For those ready, this is the perfect opportunity to align what the world needs with what you uniquely offer. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a fellow designer who's ready to shift their perspective in design. And don't forget to follow the HAUS podcast to keep the conversation going every Tuesday. Stay well, stay curious, and keep designing your life with intention. See you next time.